Yeah,
Go.
everybody. So we're back. So the 5 o'clock chat to Dave is becoming a little bit of a ritual, and one which I'm thoroughly enjoying. I think it's an hour earlier in London for Dave.
It is.
Um, but yeah, we're talking principles and just dialogue. Dialogue is a free flow of information. Dialogue creates insights for us. And as I mentioned, it's just so great to have Dave as a bit of a thinking partner and a conversation partner in these things. So we try and get a bit of continuity between what we spoke about yesterday. And one of the things that did come up yesterday, and I think the time before, was just the concept of root and fruit. And since I've known Dave, 10, 11 years, I know that I think one of our earliest conversations together was about roots and fruits because Dave is something that's just so part of your philosophy, way of doing things. So do you want to kick us off on that? So let's just reconnect and see where we go with it.
Yeah. So it's nice. Yeah, this is. I'm enjoying. I know 4 o'clock's coming. I look forward to having the computer ready. So I'm enjoying these. If no one else is, and so so just as you would get a mental picture in your mind of a big oak tree in the middle of a field, and what you see on the leaves of this tree. That represents the fruit. It's what we see. It's what people see. It's what's above ground. But we all know that actually, as much as you see above ground, is there evidence there is in the underground. That actually the real life, the real anchor, the real thing that creates life of this tree is found in the root structure. Now, in my experience, certainly in counseling over the years, I find that people spend an inordinate amount of attention on the fruit. So if they're in an argument, they spend a lot of attention on the words or the emotion or something that's being said. The stuff that's tangible, the stuff that can be seen. And we can get very sidetracked in trying to fix what is visible, what I would call the fruits, without paying attention to what is actually causing those fruits, which is the roots of a situation. And so I tend to tell people when I'm coaching them is to always ask root questions rather than fruit questions. So sometimes in a crisis like we've been facing here, our natural response might be fear or anger or anxiety, etc. And so I would be saying to people, okay, you feel anger, you feel anxiety. Let's ask the root question. What is causing those feelings? Let's start to tunnel. And a counselor, I can't remember his name, said that you should try and go for the five question principle. And you go down 5 levels of saying, well, why? Why is that? And why is that? And why is this? And as you go down the levels, you actually start to find that the real root of something can be seemingly quite disconnected from the actual fruit that's being manifest. And so it's a challenge for us all to start to reevaluate, why are we feeling the way we're doing? Why do we spend so much attention on the visible fruits in our lives? And yet we tend to deny or not pay enough attention on the root structure of our lives and what's causing what. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenge with going to the root, and probably why we don't do it, is that there's a hard part to it.
Hmm.
And the hard part is taking time and being prepared to, to the word we've been using over the last 2 days, to almost quieten down, slow down, and to ask those hard questions. And sometimes we don't really want to dig that sort of ground up
Yes.
because we might be scared of some of the things that we find.
Yes.
Would you say that's a fair sort of reflection?
Absolutely. So the journey of self-discovery, I think, is crucial if we want to keep developing as human beings, developing as adults. I think there is always a childlikeness in us, and actually, under times of crisis, that wants to come out. We want to retreat, we want to comfort ourselves, we want to couch back into those emotions. But actually, this crisis time probably is the best time to
Yeah.
go on a journey of discovery, to ask yourself the question, why am I thinking this way? Why do I feel this way? I know that you've, as long as I've known you, Mikey, you've had this phrase where you talk about what is your internal story. And I think the internal story talks to the root system of a lot of our lives. Maybe you could unpack that for us a little.
Yeah, so I love stories, and I tend to move into storytelling mode wherever I can. But all of us are storytellers and story creators, so we're creating stories about everything. And the stories we create are often because of root issues. So if I've got a root issue, which is nobody can be trusted, I will often be creating stories in my encounters and engagements with everybody that are supportive of the root feeling of the world is scarce, and nobody around here can be trusted. So we often need to challenge the stories that we create, so that we go into the root issues. And these assumptions or attachments that we then begin to make and hold on to need to be opened up.
Yeah.
So, for example, I love the 3 Ps. Say you're in a given situation like we are now, we could be creating a story based on root issues that goes something like this. This is personal. Why is this happening to me? What have I done wrong? And the moment you challenge the assumption, and a good way of doing it is to just create it as a question, is the assumption true that this is about me, that this is personal? Yes, no, maybe. The moment we get to no, it's not, or maybe it's not, we begin to open up avenues of exploration. Another second P, permanency. So we mentioned this a couple of days ago. But is it true that this is permanent? So we often take something that's temporary and make it permanent. Is the assumption true? Yes, no, maybe. The moment we get a no or maybe, we free ourselves to move. The third P that I really love is the word pervasiveness. So I'm a little bit stuck at home. Is it true that my stuckness at home needs to be pervasive into all my feelings? Is that assumption true? Yes, no, maybe. So linked to root beliefs are often assumptions, implicit associations, that if we begin to open them up, can begin to cause us or bring about a different narrative forming. But again, this takes, you need to do the spiritual work. And it's not something you don't change assumption straight away, even by just the questions I'm asking, but you begin to create a platform that's challenging them, so that you can create a new narrative.
I love those 3 Ps. So that's permanent,
Pervasive,
personal, permanent, and pervasive.
Yeah.
I love that. The more you dig down into your root system, the more you start to ask real questions, you will bump up against what we would call the spiritual dimension of a person, because we are more than just factual based. There is a sense that we need to feel connected to something much bigger, much greater than necessarily ourselves as well. And I think doing the root journey on all of our parts of our lives is essential to growing up. When we talk about roots and fruits, I've told the story. I think it's a Covey story in the end, that when we say about patience, we want to have a lot of patience in our lives. And then I would ask people, well, what do you think is the root or the thing that causes patience? Because we all know that you can't, if you keep telling yourself, I must be patient, I must be patient, I must be patient, you'll get impatient with yourself saying it, right? But if you dig down, we discover actually patience is a fruit of understanding. When you have understanding about something, the natural effect is that you become patient. And so it would be a complete waste of time to try and become more patient. No, what we need to do is become more understanding.
Yeah, it's a beautiful example.
And there's an example of people can spend their whole lives feeling totally worthless because they never get on top of their emotion, but it's because they've never attached the right root of understanding to that emotion. And so driving those questions really help us.
Yeah.
So maybe, yeah.
And Dave, here's something so interesting as well, and you've just sparked my thoughts. And so many times we try to make change, but the change is driven by an outcome. So, for example, I see a picture of a guy with a six-pack and nice muscles or whatever, nice body.
Again, eh?
And you notice I said I see a picture of a guy, not you. But the change that I then want to create, so for example, go to gym, exercise rigidly, is based on the outcome. Yeah. So the change is driven by an outcome, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. So most company KPIs, objectives, are driven by an outcome. But then there's another change motivation, and it's linked to our identity. Mm. So imagine I come up with a statement which says, I am a person who is healthy, who is fit. Because I am healthy and fit, I'm committed to training in the gym for an hour. Mm. So what we've done there is we've gone to a root issue of identity. And I think so much of the way we behave and respond is linked to who I feel I am, and my beliefs of it. And so change can be driven by the outcome, or change is driven, again, to your language, we're getting to a root issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's exciting. If you can imagine a triangle, new truth at the top. We get the idea of new truth. And what we immediately want to do is we want to implement that new truth into our life. As you said, we want to suddenly see an outcome of this new truth. And usually it's met with a whole bunch of frustration. But what needs to happen with new truth, firstly, is it needs to firstly permeate our subconsciousness, our being, our heart. New truth needs to firstly change, you say, our identity. I love that word. Who I am. It needs to change the value structure within me. And the natural effect of changing a value structure is that the outcome comes in, but it's a natural outcome. Just like we talked about, you go and you say, I must be more patient as a man. But actually what needs to change is the value of understanding. And the natural outcome of that would be patience, right? By ingesting the value that says, I need to be healthy, I need to be someone who's physically strong, the more that imbibes into our being of who we are, the natural effect is we find ourselves wanting to run, we find ourselves re-looking at the labels of our food and changing our behaviors. But if you short circuit that process, and I've seen this so many times, in the 90s, everything was 5 P's to success, or 3 C's to this. So you remember all of that. And if you followed these 3 P's, you'd always be there. And what happened was people just got very frustrated because they're chasing the fruit without doing the root work. And that's just exciting when people do the work. It's exciting to see the change. Love it.
So I'm just thinking, so how do we get to the root issues? So I think a couple of things we said is, one, is going to take time. Mm. 2, you're going to have to ask yourself some really good questions, and that's why I love questions, because questions cause us to think at a different level, provided the question's a good question.
Yeah.
And so that's what we focus so much time on. But anything else that somebody would do besides for time and questions?
Well, I think the other thing we need is we need to find safe people, or people that we feel safe with, that help us to show us our blind spots. Because we think that we see things with clarity, but actually there is, I've always said there's no such thing as truth. It's just my truth and your truth. And we need to find people in our lives that we do trust, and we can ask them to ask us the difficult questions, or even make sure that we are answering those questions with truthfulness. Yeah. So yeah, it does take time. You can't short circuit the process.
And that's why feedback that you most need to hear is priceless. Mm. And whenever somebody gives you that feedback, they're taking a huge risk. But do we have those people in our lives who are just opening up the blind spot? I think the other thing that comes out for me would be we're more likely to get to root issues when we make a fundamental shift from blame to accountability.
Yes.
And the accountability goes, I've got to look inward. I can't be looking outward.
Ownership.
Yeah, you take an example of a manager who complains, why don't my people do what they should be doing? They're useless. But when you begin to dig inward, you might begin to find that uncomfortable places and spaces which says, but you're the problem.
Yes.
It's you. Now that's absolutely freeing, because the moment the focus is on me, I can begin to do something about it.
Exactly.
But as long as I'm blaming outside, then
yes, exactly.
then,
Exactly.
yeah.
So ownership is a huge thing of getting to a root issue. Owning, and owning your own happiness, owning your own emotions, rather than blaming your emotions either on chemical, it's just chemicals, or it's just an outside thing. No, I'm owning how I feel. I'm owning where I am, my state of being right now, taking responsibility for it. I think this will be something we should definitely talk about in podcasts to come as well, Mike.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I suppose final question is there any root thing that you've identified in the last 3-4 weeks? Have you been doing a little bit of this work yourself?
Yeah, and I think the overarching thing for me was fear. I think, fear of, will I have a job at the end? Will there be money? What will this happen? And I think one of the roots of fear was too much information, too misloading information, not listening to the right stuff, having the TV on too long, constantly filling my mind with all of these different reviews of what could and couldn't go on. And I had to get back to what we said yesterday, that quiet place where we wrestle against the noise and we start to bring it down, and actually realize that a lot of our fears are, well, as I used to say, false evidence that appears real. And when you start to strip it back, you realize that a lot of your fears are just based on nothing really. So yeah, I think taking what we spoke about yesterday, the meditation, the quietness, the stilling of our mind, and then doing the root discovery, I want to find out the roots of how I feel. Those two disciplines work very well together.
So I suppose the encouragement as we close this, Dave, is for people to make sure that they use some of the time that's been given to them to do that self-inner spiritual reflection work. Maybe get some feedback from people. Don't get paralyzed by it. I think that would be a big thing as well. Don't get paralyzed by it. Remember, this is a good process of just saying, what are the root issues here so that the fruit can be good?
I like that. I like that. Yeah, may we find the roots to the fruits in our lives, that we might bear better fruit in the future.
Yeah. Good.
Great talking to you, Mike. Let's chat again on Monday. Have a great weekend.
I'm going to do that. Thanks, Davey. Cheers.